Hey everyone, this is Stren from ExtremeRigs.net back with another review. Today we are going to be looking at the Razer Tournament Edition keyboard, which is here and also here. You may notice I have two and we'll talk about that a bit later. First off, let's take a look at the keyboard. If we unplug it here, you can see now it's very much a shorter keyboard. That is, it's a 10 keyless, which means it doesn't have the numeric keypad, the 10 key number pad on the side here. First off, why would you want a keyboard like this? Well, a lot of people don't really use the number pad that much. Certainly gamers generally don't use it. Generally they'll have their left hand over on the WASD keys, and then your right hand on the mouse. One thing I found when gaming, I don't like a full keyboard because it separates my hands quite a lot. And that can be uncomfortable for some people. You know, if you end up with a big keyboard, particularly one of the huge ones with extra macro keys and stuff like that, then you can end up with your hands spread out quite far, while a 10 keyless can bring it in. Of course, the other advantage of a 10 keyless is portability. This is called the Tournament Edition for a reason. It's designed to be taken to tournaments. So if you're going to a LAN party, for example, this is a lot more convenient to carry than a full-size keyboard. This will fit in a backpack. A full-size keyboard may not. It might be sticking out the top, and then you might be worried about losing it or someone stealing it. So this is just more convenient. It also means it's going to be lighter for the same strength. So as you can see, the look is fairly simple. There's no extra stuff going on here. The other thing to bear in mind is there's no backlighting. Only a few of the keys, the scroll up for example and the caps lock, they have backlights if they're turned on. And then there's this little Razer icon down the bottom here that lights up, and you can turn that on or off as your heart desires. So it's a very plain, simple look, but that doesn't mean that the features are not there. So for example, in the software, that's where a lot of the features kind of come in, and you can bind any key to any function, whether it's launching a macro or doing something on the mouse, for example a double click. You can pretty much redefine this keyboard to do anything on any key press. So this to me is far more useful than, for example, a keyboard with only specific macro keys, because often those macro keys are off to the side and they're not really within easy reach. This one means you can do anything you want, and that's beautiful to me, and without making the keyboard bigger, so it's very space efficient. So just to go over some of the physical features here, you have this kind of soft touch plastic on here. You might be able to hear the noise as I gently stroke it and caress it. It is soft touch. If you have very greasy hands, you will notice some marks on there, but they come off pretty easily. While the front is soft touch plastic, the back is just plain old plastic. You do of course get some feet on here so you can prop it up. Worth noting is that the angle, you can see the keyboard's already got a slight angle on it. So this, if you're used to a very cheap keyboard that's just extremely flat, you may not need the feet as much as you thought you might. So if you like a very flat keyboard, then this may not be what you're looking for. But generally I think most people like a slight raise, and I think this one is just about perfect. Of course on the back you also get rubber stops in 5 places just to stop it sliding around. You can see on my desk here, the keyboard doesn't move, but other stuff on my desk falls over. So just headphones. So the rubber feet work exceptionally well. There's 2 screws here, and you can feel some extra stuff under this serial number sticker here. So I'm guessing you can't really take it apart without breaking through that and possibly voiding your warranty. Not 100% sure on that, but that's often the way these things work. So there's no extra features on here in terms of USB. You know, some of these keyboards have a USB hub built in. This one does not. There's no headphone or microphone socket. There's no, I was going to say there's no volume control, but there is. You have, you know, Windows Media keys on here, you know, your volume, your mute, your play, pause, fast forward, etc. So essentially you have everything you need. Putting in a USB hub, it's somewhat more convenient sometimes, but it's really not a big deal. You know, adding it would push up the price. And this is a keyboard that is very attractively priced. It comes in at about $65 to $80, depending on the version. And that makes a good transition into what the two versions are. The standard edition, also called the Essential, is one that makes clicky noises. Then there is the Stealth edition, and the Stealth edition is quieter. You'll see we have two versions here. We do not have the Stealth edition. The two versions I have, one is the 2014 edition and one is the 2013 edition. And the difference is really, because they are basically identical, is just in the type of switch. And we'll go into the switches a little bit later. The last thing I want to touch on is the connector. It is a micro USB on this end, and the only cable that comes with the keyboard is a USB cable. It's a nice, you can't really see it, but it's a nice little black braided cable as you'd expect. Now because it comes out here, it's going to stick out a little bit, so you can't bump this keyboard up next to something here. You're going to have about 1.5 inches of clearance that you're going to need for that cable to come out. Just a bit of a shame. I'd kind of like to see that as a USB Type-C connector, the ones which are reversible so you can put it in either way. And I'd like that to be a right angle, so it comes in and either the cable goes that way or that way. I don't really like ones that come straight out, and you know, in this case you can see I have it a box here and I don't really want to jam the cable into it. So something to think about. So in general terms, it's a very affordable mechanical keyboard. It doesn't have a lot of extra bells and whistles to drive up the price, but it's built with Razer's usual quality. It's not too light, it's not too heavy, so you can carry it around with you. You're not going to get tired by lugging, you know, 20 pounds of steel around with you. But it's still strong, you know. I can try and flex this and get a bit of creak out of the plastic and maybe a tiny bit of flex, but you don't feel like it's going to break on you. You feel like even if you really rage on the keyboard, it's going to survive. So that's the physical overview. The last thing to talk about is the switches. Like I mentioned, the 2013 and 2014 editions are slightly different. The old 2013 used Cherry switches, Cherry, a company based in Germany. They've had a lot of problems keeping up with the demand for their mechanical switches, which are generally regarded as some of the best. Razer, getting frustrated, decided to make their own switch. This one comes with the Razer Green switch. Now, of course, Razer don't have a lot of history making switches, so they don't actually make the switch. It's outsourced to another company called, and I know I'm not going to pronounce this right, but it's spelled like Kale H. So generally what that company does is to make copies of Cherry switches. The patent on Cherry switches expired a while back, so now anyone's free to copy the exact thing. Now, Razer have tweaked the design. So basically, the switches you get are essentially a Razer tweaked copy of the Cherry switch. So while the original had the Cherry blue, this has the Razer Green, and the difference is supposedly just in the distance it takes to actuate the switch. So that means it's not the total travel distance of the switch, i.e. when I press it down, it's not the total movement of the switch, it's the amount of movement it takes before the switch actually recognizes as pressed, which happens before you hit the bottom of the movement possible. So Razer actually decreased that, so the new switches are a bit more sensitive. The other thing I've noticed between the two is the Razer Green switch is a bit lighter weight. In other words, it's a little easier to press. And if you're into a clicky more clicky kind of style, like this, you're generally looking for that kind of feedback. So in general terms, and switches are so personal, generally I prefer the cherry switch, the last year's model, a little over this year's model. I do think the green switch for me is a bit of a downgrade. It feels a little less precise. It doesn't feel as secure. It's kind of like a car door. You know, if you shut a car door, if it feels kind of too lightweight, then it feels almost, I mean, cheap is the wrong word, but it doesn't feel as good as a nice solid thunk. Not like a thunk like you slammed it, but a certain weight to it, you know. So that's really the overview of the keyboard itself. The last thing to talk about is the software real quick. Okay, so let's talk about the software itself. One of the best features for the competitive gamer is really that, you know, when you go to a tournament, you can plug in your keyboard, and what the software does is it asks you to log in, and you'll have created an account previously, you'll have set up everything, and it will pull your settings from Razer servers. So when you log in, there's no setup to do. You just plug your keyboard in, log into the app, and then all of your settings are just there. There's no messing around. So you can see there's, you know, once you've logged in, if you open the app, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see the keyboard here. And you can click any of these keys. For example, let's click this U key, and we can say, I don't want it to be default. I want it to be a macro, let's say. And then you can assign a macro. You'd have to record one first, but then you can add it on. So any of these keys, absolutely any key, you can customize to any feature at all. Of course, there's also the lighting settings. So this is actually customizing keyboard down here, so you can see this light is just pulsing there, and you can see on the screen here it's set to pulsate. So you can turn that off, you can change the brightness, or you can switch it off, whatever you want to do. You can also set gaming mode. So you can enter gaming mode by pressing the function F10 key. And that just disables some of the other features. So, for example, your standard Windows keys like the Window key or Alt F4, Alt Tab, you can disable those if you want. There's also a macro area for you to record your macros. And then the last thing is the stats page. This is useful for some people to really tweak their configuration for a specific game. You know, if you're competitive in one specific game, what this does is it basically tracks what you do, where your mouse is on the screen, what keys you press, how often do you press them, and generates a heat map of, you know, which keys are the most popular and where the mouse is mostly on the screen. And this can really help you to either rearrange a UI or work on customizing your keys, so the keys you use most are the ones that are easier to press, so that you're not wasting a finger that basically does nothing. You can instead use that to have a quicker reaction time to something. So that's really useful if you're competitive, and this is really what this keyboard is about. And the fact that it delivers everything a competitive gamer needs and yet is affordably priced. This isn't set with a load of gimmicky features. This is designed to be everything you need for a gaming keyboard at a great price. So overall, we really like this keyboard. Like I said, personally I prefer last year's switches a small amount. They're both great and heavily recommended. So really that's it from me. Please do, as always, subscribe to the channel, like it. It really helps us. And stay tuned for more from us.